Salvete vobis, salvete vobis. I'm John Coleman from ApocatastasisInstitute, an institute for the humanities and alternative college and high school here on New Milford, Connecticut, USA. The purpose of this broadcast is to recap our 2025 walking pilgrimage, the Shrine of Our Lady of Lourdes in Litchfield, Connecticut. We have formally entered a few days after the pilgrimage. We have formally entered the feast of the Assumption. And of course, we hold this pilgrimage every year on the weekend before the Assumption or on the weekend of the same if it falls on a Saturday. So I did not plan this recording to be so well timed, but we do have Providence, and we do have newsletters that need to get out. And as we get through our little slideshow here, I can assure you that the pictures you will see, which unfortunately have to be broadcast from my cell phone via my document cam because it would have taken about 3 days to email them to myself. For some reason, the USB cord is not cooperating with the cellular phone and my computer. And so this was after flopping around for an hour. What you're about to see is the least painful option. However, all of these pictures within a fortnight of this broadcast will be available on our pilgrimage page. Now, as you old veterans of Apocatastasis know, you get one plug. You get one advertisement every broadcast. And for this time around, I think appropriate to our topic, I would like to invite each and every one of you to join the staff and students of the college online during the week at the Divine Office. Week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out. We pray the Divine Office, the Breviarium Romarum, or the Liturgy of the Hours, the Liturgia Orarum, as the Spirit and our interests move us, but what's most important is the praying. So that's down below. The pilgrimage page is down below in the description, as is the Divine Office page. Every single one of you, enrolled or not, is invited. Now, whether it's the Divine Office or our topic at hand, the walking pilgrimage, this is the third, fourth time that we've done this. The years do fly by. You might be asking yourself, what on earth do such events, plural, and whatever other religious things we get up to from time to time, the Transitus of St. Francis and what have you, what on earth do these things have to do with a school, much less a school which has no formal confessional affiliation? And in a broad sense, these things enrich culture. I'm coming up, believe it or not, it struck me lately, I'm coming up on my 19th year teaching. Talking about years going by. 19 years. And as the time has gone by, I've gotten to be grouchier and grouchier towards various strains of alternative education, homeschool and unschool, and whatever it is I'm doing up in the college years. But I'm meditating, and I'm thinking, what set me off on this peculiar path? And part of that, to answer this question, what does a pilgrimage have to do with Apocatastasis, especially because we don't have a confessional affiliation? I had to remind myself that secularism, naked, stark secularism, is not a good thing. There is such a thing as a healthy secularism. The late Pope Benedict, Lord of Merciarum, spoke of that and used that very phrase. But that's not what I'm talking about. And the reason I've set off on this path, quite literally, when it comes to this pilgrimage, but also however grouchy I might get towards what calls itself alternative education, is an equal and much greater dissatisfaction with the society secular education is producing. So what does a walking pilgrimage have to do with apokatastasis? Well, in the most general sense, religious expressions are the greatest expressions of culture. And that is fundamentally our telos, the enrichment of culture, personal worth leading to enriched culture. And so I don't want to get too philosophical here, but it's worth always orienting ourselves. When you're on a walking pilgrimage, it occurred to me rather starkly that if you take a wrong turn, if that old GPS, that old internet on your cell phone, John, if this conks out and you take a wrong turn, the consequences of not being oriented properly will be quite more unpleasant than if it were in an automobile. You could be walking for miles in the wrong direction, walking for miles. Yes, it's always good to orient ourselves. And so I did want to say a few words in that direction. I'm sure we'll have all sorts of traveling puns and play on words ahead of us. Okay, so you got your plugin, and I think the only other order of business before I turn on the document camera is to make a mention that the opening music, as well as the continuing lower in volume background music, is Gandora no Uta, which is a Japanese composition from the early 20th century. You film buffs will recognize Gandora no Uta as the score to the film Ikaru, which is an excellent film altogether. Something of a Japanese version of A Christmas Carol, something of it, although hardly a adaptation. Yes, Ikaru. That's the music in the background comes from that. What's the significance there? Not one that I really planned, but I will tell you as we move now to change the camera. In fact, speaking of Ikaru, that's my, I'll show you here. There we go. That little fella here on the swing, that's the actor, who, interestingly enough, I don't want to digress here, but that actor was one of the Seven Samurai about 2 years later. So Kurosawa was the director. He was like the Japanese Spielberg. And you probably heard of the Seven Samurai. There's an American adaptation in the Wild West to that. Anyway, Ikaru is the song, and this is not film class. So, okay, the next thing we're going to have to do is turn on our camera. Now, this is the document camera. Like I say, it would have literally taken me into the early hours of the morning to email all of these to myself. And so this is the least painful of painful options. Some of these pictures are going to be a little overexposed, but like I say, they will all be eventually within a fortnight put onto a proper carousel, a proper a proper gallery on our pilgrimage site, and you'll get the real deal. But like I also say, I have a newsletter that needs to get out, and this needs to get recorded. And a pilgrimage is a little bit rough and ready, and I think our slideshow here will be just as rough and ready, and I think we'll enjoy it no less for it. Okay, so indeed, this is what did I put on the pilgrimage page here? Yes, the third annual. So this is the fourth time that we've done this, and it's always the week and before the Assumption. And every year it grows a little bit. The first year is a very, very Spartan affair. The second year, a little bit more complex, and it's been developing, thanks be to God, over these years. And this year was a big development because the pilgrimage was expanded to 2 days. And please God, next year it will expand to 3 days and will begin in Waterbury. We are going to step off in 20 and 26 from the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception and make our way. So I'm just teasing that because we're going to need a lot of help next year. And this will, in time, come to be a great event. It is already a great event in significance and in grace. It will, in time, get to be a great event in bodies. And at the end of this presentation, I have some considerations as to why there were not very many bodies on this pilgrimage. So we'll get there in due course. So this is our start point. This is St. John the Evangelist Church in Watertown, Connecticut. And as I'll have much occasion to do throughout this august presentation, I want to thank so many people who helped out on this pilgrimage. It was not the biggest volume pilgrimage. It's not Chartres. It's certainly not the Compostela, but it will be in time, please God. But nevertheless, there was plenty of help. The people who let me drop my car off at their house and assisted with the shuttling, the dear father at this St. John the Evangelist Church, the shrine authorities in Litchfield, the Lourdes Shrine authorities, Father Collins at Our Lady of Grace in Bantam, the participants, and so forth. Many thanks to go around, but indeed, thanks to the good father here in Watertown, we were able to step off here. Now, I am kicking myself as we move along because as I can't see it here, we had a great statue. They have a great statue of the Virgin Mary outside their church here, but I'm kicking myself that I did not get a picture of the statue of Rosie the Riveter, which is down Main Street and apparently was newly installed. There's a big life-sized color statue to the World War II icon, and I thought that was a tickle to see Rosie as I was getting queued up here. So the first day, which was the real slog, and I learned a lot, as we'll get to know along our little journey ahead, I got to learn a lot of things to tweak for next year. But day one was the big slog, and one of those tweaks will be never, ever to do 20 miles in one day, much less with a 40 or 50 pound pack on one's back. That was the killing part, but I'm getting ahead of myself. And as I hoped, in fact, I was the only participant for day one, and that hope was because I did want to trial run this. And I can assure you that being more eccentric than tough, if an eccentric person like me could not or could barely make the 20-mile trip, I don't think any normal person would be. So I'm very happy, in fact, this year that I did not have a companion. Let's see, a non-heavenly companion. This time it would have been most unpleasant. Here we go. All right. So here's actually the statue of the Virgin, which graces the front of St. John the Evangelist. And as it happened, this was on the 8th of August. It was the feast in the general Roman calendar of St. Dominic. As it happened, setting out, the hymn from the Liturgia Orarum was Novus Atleta Domini. And I got tickled so much. And when we get to Saturday, I'll make another mention. But I got tickled so much on this this start point of the journey that would be the hymn, the new athlete of the Lord, Novus Atleta Domini, in the Latin liturgy of the hours. And there happened to be a funeral that day, so that was also something I was praying for, not just the repose of that man's soul, but all the intentions there too. You come to find priests spend a lot of time doing funerals, so both the pastor here and one of the other pastors had funerals this weekend. So anyway, Lord have mercy on them. So you got to go this way. So there's St. John the Evangelist, and moving along here. Some of these are repeat pictures. So we made our way. We, being myself and whatever angels and saints and souls of the departed were with me, made our way down this main street. And this is the gazebo that you see along the route there, and it actually had three American flags. It was a nice effect there. Beautiful day. The weather was astonishing for both days. You could not have asked for more, and it was just stupendous. Even the chemtrail pilots were not to be found. They must be on holiday themselves. But a beautiful day. There's a reason. Um, there's a reason we have sayings in English like the journey is just as important as the destination, and we have different things to that effect. And that's something that struck me as an automobile user myself, rather recalcitrant one, I'm afraid, is you notice things when you're going so much slower on foot. You notice things that you wouldn't otherwise. And architecture was a topic which kept coming up. These are houses that ordinarily you would fly right by, and you could spend some time, just enough time as you were walking by to really notice. There are some really interesting buildings along the way. This is some rich fella, probably from the 19th century or something. But you wouldn't really notice this house if you were just speeding on by. So the pilgrimage does put you into a whole other relationship with time, especially now that we're up to 2 days and 3 days next year, please God. You have a whole other appreciation for time and for nature. You can see the rhythms of nature, most outstandingly the light, right, as the morning turns into the midday and so forth. And you can see why in the Christian tradition, pilgrimage is such a reoccurring motif. I mean, almost immediately after the end of the Roman persecutions, you see Christians going on pilgrimage. Even Constantine's mother, Saint Helena, almost single-handedly initiates the tourism industry in Palestine and finds all sorts of relics, including the true cross. But I mean, it is almost immediately after the Council of Nicaea, you start seeing Christians starting to make pilgrimage because there are so many lessons there. They seem simple, but like many simple things, profound. And this whole idea of the journey towards sanctity, the journey towards theosis, the journey of life, the journey of grace, as you like. So this is heading off on Route 6, and this particular image, we're heading to our first destination, and I say I should say in terms of normie visible reality, but I'm confident there were many angels and saints and many people who could not be there. So if I flub my grammar, maybe I'm not flubbing after all. But this is Route 6 West, if memory serves. And the first destination, farther off than I could have known at this point, was the Abbey of Regina Laudes in Bethlehem. So this is the not here, not this image, but this abbey, of which we'll have certain images. This abbey is for Benedictine nuns, and it was on our itinerary. Now, if you go on our pilgrimage website, you can see the map of that, and we slightly altered it. I slightly altered it to go a little bit farther west, to pull to Norman Schwarzkopf, and who gets that reference, and took a safer, much more quiet route than I had initially planned, going through Morris and up along the main roads there. So there were some changes there, but as this particular day wore on, I was less and less scrupulous about that. Okay, so the next image here is a school, still pretty close to the center of Watertown. Looks like a very fancy school for the sons of millionaires, you'd say, with the looks of it. And they had some I don't know, chaperones or chauffeurs could be. So you didn't get too close to this, but someday perhaps this will be the campus, the Watertown campus of ApocatastasisInstitute. All right. So moving along, um, at about this time, I decided to really hoof it and go barefoot. Now, normally that should not have been a big deal for myself. Um, I'm quite attuned to barefoot running and so forth, so quite conditioned, let's say. However, this might have been an example of being a bit too over enthusiastic, because while you may be able to barefoot run on grass, come to find the asphalt is a damn sight harder than the grass. In addition to that, I'm going somewhere with this. In addition to that, uh, the pack I was wearing could not, in addition to the bag and the water altogether, all of that must have been at least an additional 40 pounds, 40, at least. And those 2 points, the hardness of the asphalt and especially the weight of the pack, led to some very pronounced blisters on my heels. I would say no less than 4 miles or 5 miles, if that. I don't even think it was that. Maybe 3 miles, and that was the first real learning lesson. I was not experiencing. I was not anticipating that, and there was a long way to go. There was a long way to go. And these weren't just uncomfortable blisters like, if you wear shoes too tight. These had the potential, if I didn't go back in the sandals and come Saturday, the socks as well for additional padding. If I had not paced myself in that manner, those sorts of blisters were directly on the weight bearing part of my heel. So they could have been, and they were, quite crippling, although not fatally so, to the pilgrimage. But at this point, I was feeling ambitious there. So, all right. So for a stretch, I got my barefooting in. All right. Again, you notice so many things on the pilgrimage and walking and the meditation of it, including these flowers and all sorts of flora. I'm happy to notice this summer to have seen a few bees. It's been a while since I've seen bees, and fireflies as well. I'll be honest, I was very surprised over the days, especially the first day because I was on the roads where there were cars. The second day, it's mostly off the roads. But I was quite surprised that nobody, of the thousands and thousands of cars, nobody offered a ride. When I was a boy, that would not have been the case. But you get to meditating a lot on the state of culture and on the world, in the sense of the world, the flesh and the devil, and changes and things. Like I say, at the end of this presentation, I have some thoughts, for whatever they're worth, as to why the participation was not as robust as it ought to have been for the effort put in for recruiting. In any case, here's this sign leaving Watertown, which is something of a suburb, I suppose, to Waterbury. And here's another example along the route of distinctive architecture. These were kind of features on a farm, completely decorative, but the farm around it was in operation. Here's another thing you would have missed, right? The old milestone from Benjamin Franklin's Post Roads. These are pre-revolutionary, when Franklin was Postmaster General. I think he was Postmaster General for Pennsylvania, but he had some pull in Britain at that time. Again, pre-revolutionary. We have one of these in New Milford at the head of the green. Okay. Finally, and let's see here. Between here and here is a world of hurt. So by this point, the The blisters had formed, so the sandals were back on, and they weren't a problem quite at this hour. They were seen to. That would catch up with me, mind you, but um, eventually Route 6 would spit you out to, I think it's in like 50, 51 or something like that. And then I went up what seemed to be, a modestly titled hill called Church Hill Road. I thought that was appropriate, heading to an abbey. Well, it turns out Churchill Road is a bit more formidable than you would imagine. In fact, for next year, I'm bound and determined, as the Anglicans say in their Book of Common Prayer for their preface, bound and determined to avoid Churchill Road if at all possible. So it was a very steep dirt road, and it went on and on and on. By this hour, we're looking at about noon between this photograph and this photograph. And this was probably the roughest part, at least emotionally, right? So now all of the energy of the morning has worn off. And by about this time, I could use a break, and I wasn't quite giving myself the breaks that I needed to. You come into a rhythm, you learn and you live and learn, and you make mistakes that you don't make again. But, around this time, a bit distressed with needing a break, and you kind of, pushing yourself on. And at a certain point, the road signage, and there's very poor signage in some of these towns, I'll tell you that much. It's not just Connecticut. You see it in New York too. Road signs just are not what they should be. Let's just put it that way. And roads are not marked that should be at intersections. And anyway, so it was the case here on Flanders Road, which went on and on and on, much longer than I thought. I had lost at a certain point my not just the GPS signal, but also the signage on the road, because I was still using the paper directions. And so there was a kind of a few harrowing minutes where I had to sit down and catch my breath and, kind of reorient myself. And thanks be to God, the different tools kicked back in. But there is a strange loneliness. There is an absolutely strange loneliness when you're lost, which I was just for a few minutes there, and yet you're around people. And the physical exertion adds a whole other dimension to things. It's not altogether a bad dimension, I should say. It really does help you cut out the nonsense. So anyway, that's the backstory. Eventually everything kicked in, and I had a little roadside repast with my coffee and my water and so forth, and calmed down a bit and got on with things. Now, between the milestone, let's say, and the Abbey, was another slog. Thank God for the remainder of Friday and Saturday. I knew the route back of my hand on Saturday, but this was new this year. On this point, at no further point on the journey was I ever lost, as we had that little hiccup earlier. However, at this point and subsequent to it into the mid-afternoon, what you transition to, you come to find, is that grind. It's the slog. And so that's the mode that I was, unbeknownst to me, settling into for the next 5 hours or so. But not before visiting the Abbey itself, which I hadn't been to probably in at least 20 years. So this was after lunch, so it was very quiet. I had the chapel nearly all to myself. I believe they've renovated this. In fact, I believe the whole building's been renovated by the look of it. And with nobody around, you're kind of worried about going in the wrong place, because they're cloistered nuns. You don't want to be in the The cloister, yeah. But anyhow, this actually is the public section of the church. When I was here all those years ago, like I say, at least 20 years before, this was completely different. This was completely different. I couldn't even venture to guess how it was. Um, but anyway, it's been since changed, and they seem to have some nice digs there. The sisters do. So yeah, so stopped there, said the hours of the divine office, and caught my breath, enjoyed the air conditioning. It wasn't very hot either day. It was in the 80s, which sounds hot, but it wasn't humid. So 80 degrees is certainly manageable. Even with the physical exertion, I never found it to be oppressive. Here is, I suppose, what would serve as the rose window of a sort for this church here. You can see Our Lady. Once again, that theme, I didn't work it out that way necessarily, but there's the Virgin with Christ, and that's in the back of the chapel there. You can see the little candles, right? That here is one of the other seats for one of the priests there. That's the monastic diurnal, the Benedictine diurnal, in fact. The Stations of the Cross lit up. Here's a mosaic of presumably Saint Scholastica and Saint Benedict, which was in one of the halls there. Putting on that pack, I was beginning to really, at this point, really despise that pack, and still yet had 5 more hours with it. That was the biggest burden, and I'm not being cheesy when I say that. The pack was by far the most onerous thing about this journey. Next year, I should want to use one of those radio flyer affairs that has its downsides too, but not nearly as burdensome. Because it's not just the weight, you see, but it's the monotony of it hanging off your shoulders. And I mean, this was a heavy pack, and thank God this was a professional hiker pack that I stole from my brother. He abandoned it, as the case may be, but it had a support strap, a clip between the two shoulder straps. So when you strapped this thing across your belly, it would take a fair amount of the weight. I don't know the mechanics of it, but this strap managed to shift the weight in such a way that it was on your chest, on the front of your chest. And it was somewhat off your shoulders. And that made things more bearable, that I had this way to adjust the weight. It was not just completely hanging on my shoulders. I must say, all these days later, that some of my right shoulder is still a bit numb from that trek. By the late afternoon, I had figured out also to put my hands underneath the straps, in a sense, using my arms to hold the weight. That was, you can't do that indefinitely, but that trick, so to speak, was probably the best of it all, because the problem of using the strap that would put the weight on your chest is that it would restrict my breathing quite a bit. So it had the positive of taking the weight off the shoulders, but it had the negative of constricting the ability to take deep breaths. Of course, you're exerting yourself the whole time, so that's not good. So the hands, using your arms to hold the weight, was something that also gave me a third option there. By this point, we're looking at about 2:00 on that Friday. This was at one of the breaks. At this point, I had realized it was intelligent to take a break every 30 minutes. I had to take a 6-minute break. And of course, the temptation as the afternoon wore on, and again, the temptation, right, of the lessons of pilgrimage. One of the temptations when you are in such a bind, and you really do come to understand the slog that lays ahead, the hours that lay ahead, One of the temptations is to skip breaks. One of the temptations, you just want to get there. You just want this burden to be over. And one of the ways you fool yourself by that is by skipping breaks. But I knew that if I was to make it, in fact, I would have to take these breaks, though they added maybe 45 minutes to the journey. It had to be done. Anyway, this picture of some Protestant community hall, some sectarian assembly center, we'll call it a church. This picture here, very ecumenical. I have to be more ecumenical. This Litchfield Hill Church happened to be facing me. Maybe they'll join us next year. Maybe if I can be more ecumenical. All right. And this was interesting because this was in a kind of strip mall affair. Now, at this hour, this is still Bethlehem. This is the center of Bethlehem, which is a humble town, which I suppose is good to have an abbey in. Although you couldn't tell the humility of the town from this rather obnoxious offer to win. Enter to win, it says here. But the town's very, very quiet. And at the end of this road, it kind of splits, and they have a little bit of a green there with a gazebo. I don't know. Do you get a I don't know, get a gazebo when you start a town in New England? But the road at this point split, and for a very, very long stretch, really, I mean, almost all the way to Bantam Lake Road, there was this split at the green here that the GPS was directing me onto a much more quiet trail as opposed to going straight through Morris and down around Camp Columbia Park. This route was much quieter that was coming up, and we'll definitely be using that next year. You want to stay off the roads as much as possible here. Now, yes, between here, which is the start of that quieter, lengthy stretch, and here, indeed, is a whole saga to itself. Now, there was no loss of direction, but this is really, I think, where the learning opportunities of the pilgrimage were had. So this is at the very end. This between here and here, you're looking at about 3.5 hours, which shows you by this point I was not in picture-taking mood. I at this point, as we get on Benedict Road, which would take me to Bantam Lake Road, which would be the last stretch before the camp for the night, I was not at this hour in a chipper mood. At this point, up until this point, I would have refused a ride had some good Samaritan, seeing this eccentric guy with a backpack and a sleeping bag and all. Up until this point, had someone offered, I would have, in holy sanctimony, rejected it. But at this point, you're looking at probably 5:30 p.m. I would have taken it. If somebody offered, I would have said, yeah, I'll tap out. I'll swallow my pride and take the lift. But anyway, that was not to be. And so this road lay ahead, which was another mile or so to cut up to Bantam Lake Road. Finally, made it to the campground. It's hard to express how welcome this welcome sign was. This is after having checked in with the campground authorities, gotten my lot assignment. And this is at the very entrance of the White Memorial Family Campground. All right, so moving on here. Yes, finally made it to the campsite, and it is hard to explain this particular feeling, having taken a load off. I'm telling you, at this hour, I was really dragging. And again, there is something very much to be said about these extreme experiences, because you do find that you learn who you are. I know this is a little thing. It sounds, it doesn't sound that big of a deal, but these experiences are very good. I think, especially for men, to have these experiences in different ways where you really exert yourself. And, if Lent is a marathon with a clock, you're trying to uh, wait out the clock on your vices and sins and things. I think the genius of a pilgrimage is you're doing much the same with distance. And again, I'm going to be real honest here. By this point, you're looking at 6:30, maybe 7 even at this point. Um, you can push yourself on with holy ideas and think about Jesus and offer it up. But I'm telling you, at this point, a lot of that stuff was wearing thin, um, and nevertheless, it is something, to have made it there through grit and through grace, and indeed through blisters and on top of blisters. So a great relief. You cannot know what that relief is, and knowing that you have, a night to relax, and to recuperate. That's probably a better word. So this is my campsite. It would happen to be number 15 for whatever that matters at the White Memorial Family Campground. This would have been about 7:15 or so. That's Bantam Lake. You can see a very beautiful um, image, a very beautiful view that I had in this direction, and the camp custodian pointed that out to me. Although I I chuckle because whilst he played up this view, 180 degrees behind me were the toilets, which he neglected to tell me were abutting my campsite. Now, for me, the campsite this night was not going to involve a tent or much less a camper or a grill. It was literally, I was just going to be lying on the ground, which is fine. It was everything I wanted in a campground, I'll tell you, just to get off my feet. Again, I cannot emphasize how onerous that pack was. Um, that was the worst thing. I could walk all day. I could walk all day barefoot on asphalt. I could even do that. But it was the pack that was the killer ingredient. But that was something I did not have to worry about in this image here. And it was very cute as the afternoon turned into the evening, because you would see the different families and children and things strolling around and biking here. There's a kind of a ring road around this peninsula that you're looking at. So that was very charming as the evening was setting in. This again is Friday evening. Everyone's taking a load off, and it was a nice energy to the time and place. Now, speaking of energy, you gotta eat. So you gotta eat, drink, and be merry. Um, was it necessary, John, to bring the vodka? Yes, it was. Let me tell you, that was something I was very much looking forward to, and as I was the pigeon peas from the Goya Corporation, and whatnot. And you know what? I didn't have any heater for the soup, for instance, the tomato soup or the chili. I don't care. At this point, I was like a king. I was like a king here. Um, to just be sitting down and imbibing and relaxing and praying. So here's the Te Deum from the office. I don't know why on earth would I have taken. Oh, of course. What am I asking myself that? Yeah, why would I take a picture of the Te Deum? Yeah, because the Te Deum is the Thanksgiving hymn. The church sings it on all feast days, including Sundays. So the Te Deum is sung as a Thanksgiving prayer. In fact, I think canonically there are canonic. I think there are times canonically it's actually recommended to be sung. In any case, that's why I have a picture here of the Te Deum. It's a Thanksgiving. Thank you, God, for getting me here, not getting run over by these drivers or crippled for my own stupidity in planning, my own foible. So there's your Te Deum. Here's the hymn I had mentioned from the office, Novus Atleta Domini. This is for Saint Dominic, the new athlete of the Lord. Dominic will be praised, and so forth. Let's see, who conformed to the name made a man of the gospel and so forth. But anyway, Novus Atleta Domini, the new athlete of God. So I thought that was really neat. That was the hymn for both morning prayer and evening prayer from the office. So athletic day done, athletic hymn sung. Here is the morning sunrise on the opposite bank. You can't quite see the toilets. They would have been to my right. Intervening between this picture and this, of course, was the nighttime where I spent it on the ground. And I did have the pleasure of being on a little bit of a hill, and I knew enough to sleep with my head on the lower part of the hill to drain as much fluid away from my legs as possible. So I just stayed there. I didn't sleep very well. The ground is very hard and very dusty. Unfortunately, I put on my good clothes just because it was kind of getting chilly. I put on all my clothes just to layer up, and then went to sleep on this dusty ground, which didn't do my Saturday clothes much good. But anyway, a beautiful sunrise here. A little bit chilly. Again, I had no means to heat up my coffee or heat up the food in the morning, so it was a rather nippy morning altogether for an August. You come to find, we'll see if we have an image here. Yes, on Lake Bantam. This is a little bit after what I wanted to mention, but you do come to find on such semi-chilly mornings that almost instantaneously or within just a couple of minutes in the morning of such mornings that a fog develops. And there was a neat fog that developed a little bit before this. This was taken on my way out of the White Family Preserve. And so there are all sorts of little bungalows around Lake Bantam. And I was noting to myself with my politics that had it not been for the White Family Preserve, I'm sure bankers and landlords would have parceled off the little peninsula we were on long ago for rich people's bungalows. So bravo to the White Family Preserve for keeping some of Lake Bantam open to non-millionaires. Here are just some boats in the morning. There were some men that were fishing or getting ready to go fishing. They were getting their ships ready. And after about a mile and a half, I made my way to Our Lady of Grace in Bantam, which in more ways than one needs a good coat of paint, as you can see on their sign. Again, probably something you don't notice when you drive by. This is right off 202. Or this statue of the Virgin out back. Could use a good coat of paint altogether. But here I waited and to see who would show up, who was going to be shuttled over. And I was able to pray morning prayer and terce from the office there with the Angelus facing the cemetery. And I was tickled that the lessons for the daytime hours all involved walking. How do you like that? Right? So here is the lesson. This is the Liturgia Orarum. It does exist in Latin. It does exist, and you're looking at it. Where's my pointer here? Right. So here's the selection. Here's the capitulum for terce. And right. So as a man carries his son, the Lord your God will carry you. And I'm just skipping ahead. And right, as you're keeping the commandments of the Lord your God, and walking and ambulare is to walk, and walking in his ways and fearing him. So wow, okay, one walking from Deuteronomy chapter 8. This was again the reading for mid-morning on Saturday for our pilgrimage. You couldn't have asked for better. Midday prayer. Look at this. Confortare, how would you translate that? I don't know, be stout and be a man and observe the regulations of the Lord your God and walk in his ways. Again, look at this again. So mid-morning prayer, midday prayer, and walk in his ways. We're not done yet. Then for mid-afternoon prayer, the second reading was from 1 Kings. The third reading in mid-afternoon on Saturday of our pilgrimage is from Prophet Jeremiah chapter 6. And the Holy Church chose another reference of walking. Look by the ways, stand by the ways and look and ask from the pathways of old, and walk in them, and ambulate in eia, and walk in them, walk in the ways of old, etc. So how fortuitous, how providential those lessons and those hymns from the day before were. It's amazing. It's amazing to see these things. And this is the beauty of liturgy, and the beauty of a pilgrimage is these things kind of pop out for you. All right. So as it happened, besides the generous person who ferried over the participants, plural, we had on the pilgrimage myself and one other lady, and I say participants plural because she brought her doggy, of whom we will have a photograph soon enough, and we set off. And as I said then, I say now, who was on the pilgrimage were the people who needed to be on the pilgrimage. Everyone says they can. Oh, I'll try to do it. I'll see what I can do. But God doesn't care about that. God cares about what you actually do, not what you would like to do. So a lot of coulda, woulda, shouldas. But the lady and her dog and myself, we were there. And thanks be to God, we made a grand pilgrimage. So we set off here and very, very briefly followed 202. We didn't even have to go on the road or even the shoulder because there's a lawn that we stayed on. You do not want to walk on the side of 202. And then we cut across a little Italian restaurant there, and that took us to the White Memorial Preserve initially. Here's another statue of the Virgin. So many of these statues of Our Lady along the way. Don't know if I would make that aesthetic choice of putting Christmas lights, but maybe it looks nice in the dark time. Interesting church, Our Lady of Grace in Bantam. You can tell it was renovated just because you can just tell it wasn't built in the way. So I suspect this was the original entryway to the church, but in the new design, it's a side wall. And hey, you do what you can. So you kind of custom made to be a statuary niche. All right. So this is getting into position to the first part of the White Preserve. You have these things that have been built up. I don't think these are Boy Scout projects. These look professional bridges. Not just this, but some other areas are not. They're not amateur projects. I'll put it that way. But this all connects. And a little bit blurry here, but you cut through the forest. There's a few times you cross the roads there, but it's all with lights and things like that. So it's designed to be used, these trails, and to interact safely with the roads. This is a long stretch here, along kind of boulevard. I tried to get a picture without the sign, but if you look directly behind the sign, there's another sign, so I just gave up. Sign everywhere, a sign. Okay. Yeah, here's another example of the white custodians have these implements, right, to make passage easier over boggy land. Here's the dog. I don't quite remember the thing's name, but here's the dog that was joining us, praying with us. Christ came to redeem all creation. If you read St. Paul's letters carefully, you'll notice that. Hence the blessing of objects, etc. Hence the sacramental focus of the church. So even dogs, in their own way, can participate on a pilgrimage. It was very, very sparsely um, congested, these trails. We didn't come across half a dozen people. We didn't come across half a dozen people on our way through this perfect Saturday morning. Remarkable how few people were out and about. This is ideal for just a morning stroll. Eventually, we made our way not just through the first part of the White Preserve and this sort of Litchfield Greenway, as it's called, which is a repurposed railroad bed, but also up Gallas Hill, again, staying off the main roads. And that was the first hill. And I have to remember there's actually a second hill in the last stretch. But between them, you have this, and this is the entryway to this section of our pilgrimage, the last section, and this is a very obscure part of the White Memorial Preserve. And I'm going to digress briefly here, because it's remarkable with Apocatastastis these past 13 odd years, 12 years, that God has put people into the life of the college, and they've given something to the college, and then God has written them out for this, that, or the other reason, and they are no longer part of the college. And it's interesting because this second day of the pilgrimage, the vast majority of this trail I would never have figured out, everything from Our Lady of Grace to here and all the way to the shrine, except that somebody at a certain point in the history of the Institute was involved, and he almost immediately after this was written out. And I think of that, especially when I consider this phenomena. I would never, ever have, especially this section, because this is not advertised at all. And the lady on the participating, she had suggested that's probably because the town council of Litchfield is snooty and probably had some tiff with the board of the White Memorial Trust, but that's just speculation. But the point is, what's not speculation is that this easement onto this part of the White Preserve is not at all advertised. And if you didn't know this was an easement, you would think this was a man's driveway. And this leads into this very wooded section. But yeah, that is the strangest thing. There was the most ultimately ungrateful individual who showed me this, and then God took him out of the life of the school. And that's one of the lessons. I'll never be able to forget that. Bit of serendipity every year that we do this, but boy, oh boy, am I happy to have been bequeathed this Saturday pilgrimage route. Here is the Bantam River, and it's a slight river most of the times. I will say, having attempted to wade and bathe in this river, that the rocks are extremely slippery at various points, because I've probed it throughout this park in days gone by, and the rocks are extremely slippery. I would not recommend walking through this. But this is on a bridge over the lake. This is towards the end of the White Memorial Preserve. In fact, this may even be this is an easement, but what we're looking at, this field, which was a type of fruit field. I don't know if it was some sort of fruit trees or vines, maybe. I forget. But we're on the easement here, and that takes you out to the roads. Eventually, you hook up with 202, which takes you to the shrine proper. And we get to organizationally the only time, every year that I get a little bit worried, which is crossing 202, because those people aren't going to stop for you. I mean, whatever. That's a whole other. I'll bite my tongue there as well. But people, motorists seem to think the roads only belong to motorists, and um, anyway, you can a fight with a car, the car is going to win. Let's just put it that way. And I do get a little bit nervous every year, and it's hard. See, this is the problem. I have no idea how many people are ever going to show up to this pilgrimage, and I can beat the bushes all day long, and I never know when to contact the police in terms of, asking them to close the road for a few minutes when we show up. At a certain point, please God, we'll have to get to that level. In the meantime, we just hope for a break in traffic and boogie woogie as quickly as possible to get to the shrine. So this is the main shrine sign, and we made our way to Holy Mass at the outdoor chapel. And the outdoor chapel was built by one religious brother primarily, and he had the help of another on and off back in, I believe, the 1940s. The shrine is administered by the Montfort missionaries. And I believe I'm very sure they have a connection to the Lady of Wisdom retreat house, which is nearby. So this is after Holy Mass. I should say, on a gross note, that whilst walking the main stretch of the driveway into the shrine, the blister on my right heel broke, and I distinctly felt the water rushing out. This was a huge blister, and you don't want that to happen. Strangely enough, it seems that the skin has reattached, which I wasn't expecting. I'm very happy for that. But that is a strange feeling that you have so much water in a blister, you can actually feel it gushing out for 2 or 3 seconds. It was a strange thing altogether. But anyway, you could actually walk better in the short term in that state. Anyway, I'll keep the grossness to a minimum going forward. You can see at the outdoor shrine, they have this sun canopy, which actually does more work than you would imagine. It's kind of translucent there, but it does its work. Just like last year, we happened to hit the same weekend that the deacons were on their retreat, the permanent deacons from the Bridgeport diocese. So it was a packed house. And in addition, there was another group of pilgrims from a parish, it's kind of Spanish-speaking sorts. And they had a bus that they come in on. So the deacons, I think, were staying there. Maybe this was the last day, I think, of their retreat. So their wives were all there. And then you had the bus with the pilgrims. So not too extraordinary a day. You can see Father Jean there with the hat, as the other pilgrim with us mentioned. She had never seen a priest with a sun hat say Mass, but when you're as old as Father Jean and you're as hard of a worker as he is, you get to wear hats too, though. I'm sure that's in the rituale, right? It happened to be the memorial of Saint Edith Stein, and Father pointed out the connection of Edith Stein, as she would have known it from her rabbinic Jewish childhood, the reading of the Shema, and that was the first reading at Holy Mass for the day. Also, liturgy nerd that I am, that also happens to form the capitulum in Compline on Saturday evenings going into Sunday, is the reading from Deuteronomy 6, Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one Lord. So that was an interesting tie-over that I certainly would have missed altogether on this achy-breaky pilgrimage conclusion. Now, the shrine has both a cafe and a gift store, and it looks like they're coming up in the world. I have not been in this building for a couple of years, and I don't remember them having that screen with their menu. This is their cafe towards the left, and they all sorts of good food there. But you can see their When I was there, it was just a whiteboard. So there you go. And this is Pilgrim Hall, where you have the dining room. And here's just another angle. You can see they have the hall carved up here. And then behind the glass, you have their gift store, and they have all sorts of goodies there. And it's a great way to um, take a breather, if you like, between Mass and the afternoon, or for us, just to wind up your pilgrimage. I was, at this point, the fatigue was truly setting in. Up until now, you can kind of grind through it, and you have kind of a second energy, of course, on in the morning and things. But by this point, I was pretty much done. And so so there you go. And yeah, that's the slideshow there. Again, this will be posted. The pictures here will be posted on in a much higher quality files on a slideshow on our pilgrimage site soon enough. I just need to, maybe a week or two just to transfer them, because it's going to take, I have to basically email every shot. These cell phone cameras have so many megapixels and things that you really can only email one or two, maybe three pictures before the email cuts you off. So it would have been impractical tonight to do that. But a few things here as we conclude, and I thank you for joining me on this recap. I'm as let's see, as achy as I was, I'm so happy to have done it with the other pilgrim and her doggie. I'm very happy for the individual. I'm very thankful to the individual who did the driving for the one pilgrim who showed up, and as many other pilgrims who would have showed up. I'm happy for the driver there and thankful, but I'm also happy to have gone over it. When this is the genius of a pilgrimage, is being able to say, I've done it. And at the end of it, we had different souvenirs. I gave some Apocatastasis's pens to the lady, and one of the souvenirs. Of course, I have a bunch of them because nobody showed up. So here, I'll show you here. Now, I learned years ago with Apocatastasis never to put the date on printed merchandise. And this isn't merchandise properly, but here, let me take one out. So if you don't put the date on it, you can use this indefinitely. I learned that a long time ago. So here's the image. This is the Assumption. It's a Spanish painting, I believe, from a gentleman, I shouldn't say Spanish, but a Colombian artist, kind of inspired by the Eastern idea of the Dormition of Mary, and she's being led up in a blanket by these angels. So that's the front of this postcard that I had made up. So I had said this to our pilgrim, that in the Compostela, you get a shell. If you go to the tomb of St. James, you get a shell. And if you go for your souvenir, and more than a souvenir, to the Holy Land, you get a palm branch, like on Palm Sunday. And I say, if you come on the Lourdes pilgrimage, the Apocatastasis pilgrimage, you get one of these bookmarks and a few pens. And in centuries to come, pilgrims will collect their palms, and they'll collect their shells, and they'll collect their postcards. But on the back, we had this write-up done with a quote from St. Louis de Montfort, who was, of course, the founder of the Montfort missionaries, or their inspiration, in any case. Have you strayed from the path leading to heaven? Then call on Mary. For her name means Star of the Sea, the North Star, which guides the ships of our souls during the voyage of this life. So I thought that was a nice little quote there. And again, if you're interested, the image on the front is the Assumption by Juan de Jesus Munera Ochoa, Ochoa, Ochoa. That's the artist, Ochoa. OA. So this concluded our pilgrimage, the bestowal of this souvenir. And let me just conclude myself with a few ideas, a few points, and we'll get on organizing for next year. So, it's hard to put in 6 months of beating the bushes with parishes and with people and with social media posts, and to have such a turnout. Ultimately, who was on the pilgrimage needed to be on the pilgrimage, and who God wanted to be there is who God had there. But still in all, there are some natural reasons we can consider as to the attendance, and we need to take these into account as we plan for our pilgrimage, our 3-day pilgrimage next year. One point to bring up in a general aspect is that well before COVID-19, but very much sped up since then, people are less and less out in public doing anything with other people. Some of you remember the book Bowling Alone by Bill Putnam, and kind of an epochal book in the early 2000s, describing this, the fact that less and less people, even then, were involved in their communities. And that's just, continued in ways Putnam probably could never have imagined. And accelerated by social media and also by bad habits learned during COVID. Okay, so that's one explanation. Actually, I suppose all of these are out of our hands. We just need to take them into account lest we get discouraged. Another aspect is the nature of American Christianity, which is heavily Protestantized. And because you're stuck with John Coleman, I do tend to see religions largely as psychological manifestations. I'm not saying there isn't a divine reality or that these objective claims aren't true. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying that when you tell me you're a Mormon, you're also telling me something about how you think. When you're telling me you're a Salafi Muslim, you're telling me not just what you believe, but also something about how you think and how you act. And regardless of one sect of Christianity, including Latin Catholicism, Americans, let me just put it that way, Americans, regardless of religion, are Protestants. And that very, very deeply influences Catholic psychology in these United States. And partially because of how the faith was mistaught for well over 150 years, 200 years, and partially just because of the nature of the American mind. Most devout Catholics in America, including Connecticut, have a very Protestant individual idea of faith. And so a communal activity like a pilgrimage, if it doesn't have personal resonance, has no larger resonance. There's no idea of building up a community, building up Catholic culture. These are actually very, very foreign concepts to even the most devout American Catholic. And so that's the second reason, is there's really no community understanding of faith in America. Yes, institutionally, Catholicism has been much better than the American version of Protestantism, of asserting the communal nature of faith. Yes, institutionally, but individually or in popular Catholicism, amongst the populace, there's a very Protestant spirit. And to speak of something like, hey guys, let's have a walking pilgrimage around the Assumption, to bear witness to the faith, to our community, that is very foreign thinking to Protestantized American Catholics. So that's the second reason. The third reason is quite interesting, and that is separate than the Protestant exaggeration of the individuality of faith is also um, philosophically, it's a much older critique. There's almost a Gnostical understanding of faith. Again, this also applies to people who you would think would be quite attracted to a pilgrimage and would be quite vocally Catholic. And what I'm alluding to is point three. So point one as to why we didn't have more people on the pilgrimage is the nature of American society as influenced by digital media and COVID-19. Part two is the Protestant individualized nature and largely the inability to work for Catholic action, because most Catholics in America individually do not see themselves as part of a group. It's their religion. It's their family's religion. They have really no consciousness of Catholicism beyond the domestic sphere. This is a very Protestant idea, in fact. But America is a very Protestant country. But the next point I would say is a very Gnostical understanding. That's what I'm building up to. And that is most Western Christians, formerly Catholic or formerly Protestant, understand Christianity as assenting to propositions. I believe, well, don't we say the creed all the time? I believe in 1, 2, 3, but it's deeper than just some ritual recitation of the creed. Most people would say that Christianity is, believing the Trinity, believing in the Eucharist, believing in this. And it's a checklist of abstract beliefs. And the problem with Gnosticism, one of the problems of this sort of, I'm using the word broadly, but this idea that simply because you internally believe something, you're A-okay. And the world of faith is a fundamentally interior, abstract, nominalistic reality. So not only do you have the Protestant exaggeration of individuality and therefore the inability to understand faith as a community activity, therefore pilgrimages have no interest to you, but also including the most devout Christians in the West believe they are living on all cylinders of faith, simply because they assert the right doctrine. And frankly, you can see a lot of bleed over from secular conservatism and actually, the world politically, left or right, as we say. You can see a lot of bleed over in this reality. The fact that you believe the right things is all that you need to worry about, or all you need to concern yourself about. That's a better way to phrase it. And therefore, American Catholics, including, as I say, the people you would think would be most interested in giving such a witness to the Catholic faith as a walking pilgrimage, they're not, because fundamentally they're Gnostics. And they believe, because they hold all of these propositions and they sign up to, they subscribe to the Nicene Creed, the Athanasian Creed, the Catechism of the Catholic Church, whatever their favorite YouTuber is telling them, whatever is the truth that never instantiates in physical reality. And there's a very Gnostical aspect, including amongst some of the so-called devout. So that's the third point. And then the fourth point is that also there is frankly a schism in American Catholicism, just as real as the schism with the Orthodox or with the traditional Protestants. And that is with a vast amount of Catholics who would tend to apply certain adjectives before Catholic, conservative, traditional. There is effectively a schism in the church in America and in the church in Western Connecticut between the actual Catholic Church and these adjective sorts of Catholics. And so, oddly enough, the same sorts of Catholics that you would imagine would love to do a walking pilgrimage to the Shrine of Our Lady of Lourdes don't show up. because of the reality that they um, how to put this politely, uh, they're not in the church. I don't know how to say it. They're they've kind of they've left the church for what there is a schism with conservative Catholicism at this hour, and the people once again that you would think would be the most supportive wouldn't be. Anyway, all of these points are out of our hands. What's in our hands are rosaries and backpacks, and what's on our feet are sandals, or maybe not, but maybe blisters. That's all that's up to us. You and I are not going to change the Protestant or Gnostical or traditionalist or consumerist nature of the people around us, including alleged followers of Jesus Christ. That's out of our hands, out of our feet. What is within these things is a walking pilgrimage. And next year, we're going to start from the Basilica, and it's going to be 3 days, and we're going to need a lot of help. So if you would like to not be a traditionalist and not be a Gnostic and not be a Protestant and not be a consumerist, if you would like to give Catholic action and build culture and give witness to Jesus and witness in your blisters, we could really use you. So thank you for watching this. Between now and next year, as you consider joining our pilgrimage, if I haven't guilted you enough, please do join us at the Divine Office, the staff and the students of Apocatastasis. Finally, I want to thank everyone who contributed to this year's pilgrimage. The person who drove, the lady and her dog who showed up, the shrine authorities whom we worked with for several months to set this up, especially the fathers at Our Lady of Grace in Bantam and St. John the Evangelist in Watertown. I also want to thank everyone who prayed for this pilgrimage. I know there were many people praying for it, and thanks be to God, these prayers bore great fruit. I'm so happy with this year's event. And also, I want to thank all of the people who spread the word about this pilgrimage, especially the fathers, the Catholic priests, who put this in the bulletins, and anyone who put this in the newspapers. I don't have time to follow up with all this, but I know it certainly made its way into a few bulletins on the Sundays leading up to the pilgrimage, so I appreciate that. And it made its way onto social media, so ditto as well. And with all of that being said, thank you very, very much, and I look forward to praying with you online at the Divine Office here at Apocatastasis, and seeing you next year for our 3-day, longer, more blistery, more generous pilgrimage. Thank you so much. Alete.